in terms of administrative notes, welcome to our session today, and we will get started. So you joined today because you're interested in hacking into cybersecurity. So what does that actually mean? We're going to go through the terms of the different aspects of cybersecurity today, and how we'll present some information to gauge your appetite for how you feel about cybersecurity and what actually cybersecurity is. Just to give you a few stats, because I'm a huge stat person, cybercrime actually cost the nation over $133.7 trillion in the previous year. And that cost is still rising. So it's something that we are definitely presenting ourselves in a position to actually fight cybercrime. And we are constantly recruiting people with the aptitude and skills to be able to work into this field. So hopefully this information that we present today will be very valuable to you in terms of what we're doing in cybersecurity operations, and if you are a good fit for a cybersecurity career. So when we talk about what is cyber, we're actually talking about, if you're a history buff, you'll appreciate the slide that's on the screen, because it gives you the background of where this word came from. So it was used in ancient Greece, and it actually means to steer, guide, or govern. So we're actually going to look at this in the context of the governing aspect. Plato used the term, which his Kubernetica term actually means to skill in steering. And then in Latin, Kubernetes actually gives us the equivalent of cybernetics. We will use this term to present the context of the information that we are talking about today. But basically, we are going to frame it in terms of cyber governing information. And basically, we frame it in the context of cyber deals with technology, obviously. It deals with processes, and it also deals with the people. So there's no one single aspect or pathway that we can pursue and gain any leverage in the cyber operational category. So cyber is the marrying of these and this balance of the technology, the processes, and the people. It's very interesting that I conducted an interview in the previous, in one day during this week, and I asked that specific question: what do you think is more important? The people that work in cyber, or the people that don't work in cyber, just the average end user computer? What do you is it the technology that's more important, or is it the processes? And what I wanted the people to say was that it's not one of those things. It's actually the balance of all of those things. Because we can't focus our attention in one specific avenue or arena. We have to make sure that we're concentrating our efforts in all areas to make sure we're covering our bases. So when we talk about cyber, we're specifically talking about governing information. Information that is stored on a computer. Information that is in transit across the internet. And information as it's shared between parties. To make sure that information isn't altered. What I sent to you is actually what you received, and that information was not altered en route. So it's really the reality of where humans and machines meet. So we'll talk about this in full context in all the different aspects of cyber as we move through this informational seminar. So in this picture, we go from, a mainframe computer where we started all the way up through our Y2K years, and you see here all of the different devices that are connected to the internet. And these devices really represent the institutions that are present here. So we have educational institutions, we have banking institutions, we have the devices that we connect to the internet that people affectionately refer to as the Internet of Things. So if you've heard the term IoT devices, that is all of the different things that can connect to the internet. Now, what you do not see on this slide is that what's missing from here is the critical infrastructure. So Department of Homeland Security deems 16 areas as critical in terms of protecting our infrastructure. And this includes things like our power grid, our financial grid, our emergency services, chemical and nuclear plants, manufacturing facilities, emergency services, healthcare facilities. All of these things are important in us actually protecting our national security interests. Because as you can imagine, if someone attacked our financial grid, it would actually affect our economic stability. If someone attacked our power grids, it would overall affect our national security. So these things today, by virtue of the fact that technology has evolved, these things that when I speak in terms of the power grid, manufacturing facilities, chemical plants, all of these things are connected to the internet. So if these things are connected to the internet, then that means what we've done is actually increased the attack surface that's available to an attacker. Because technically anything that has software has the ability from an attacker's standpoint to be exploited. It may present a vulnerability and then can be exploited by an attacker using various means. So everything that we connect becomes a vulnerability. Now, we as consumers of technology, we love to connect things to our network. We love to connect our Nest thermostats and our lights and our refrigerators and our cars. But we don't necessarily connect those with the aspect of what we are compromising in terms of security. And that's really what we're going to concentrate on, is that if you are a consumer of technology for the convenience that it provides, then we'll look at the actual implications of security that you're compromising as a result of that convenience. So as I'm presenting the material, I really want you to look at this from the aspect of everything that's connected now presents a vulnerability. So if you're looking at this organizationally or corporately or personally, everything that's connected presents an attack surface for an attacker to explore the vulnerabilities present in that connected thing, which is why we call that the Internet of Things, and find some sort of vulnerability. And the thing, please realize, may not be the actual end-all be-all of what the attacker wants from your system. The end-all be-all may be the fact that he's going to use that point of access to explore all the different points that are connected, all the different systems, all the different information that may be available on those systems in order to find the most valuable target. So Cisco has a very interesting statistic in terms of the Internet of Things, and that is in 2025, it is expected that over 75 billion devices will be connected to our network infrastructure. So as we move forward with technology and look at autonomous vehicles and just connecting more things, we have to frame that from this particular conversation, hacking into cybersecurity, about, well, that's great, that's cool, we're expanding and evolving in this technological age, but at what expense, right? At what expense? And I say that in terms of cybersecurity. So those are the things that we will evaluate as we move through this presentation. And hopefully as we move through some of the content that may seem very technical and you may not understand the terms that I speak about, but I'll be very careful to try to explain those as I move through the lecture. But please take notes as you feel necessary. You can go back and research those terms later. But at the end of this, we'll actually talk about some cyber career pathways that you may be interested in pursuing and feel like your personality is a good fit for. Before I move on from this particular slide, you see all of these connected devices. So please understand that anything connected, whether it be an ATM machine, which we'll talk about in a few minutes, whether it be a PC, whether it be a tablet or a smartphone, for some reason, a lot of people think that their smartphones are immune from the types of attacks that a PC is vulnerable to. And today, because a smartphone is really just a high-powered computer to a degree, it is not protected unless you install and actually implement the necessary controls to protect that device. As many people are migrating all of their information to the cloud, they have to evaluate the security implications of actually storing their data in the cloud and what are the risks associated with doing so. I love to tell this story because everybody looks at this slide, and this slide I actually drafted for this presentation. But I always tend to talk about this because if I say the word fish tank and I say the word casino, you look at me like, if I were to guess what the relationship was, like I have no idea. But in the context of this particular conversation, we're talking about a fish tank that has sensors, that is really an IoT device that is connected to the network. So I could have an app installed on an iPhone or installed on an iPad, where I could actually monitor the pH levels of the water in that fish tank. So instead of actually physically going to that fish tank and checking the pH levels, I could actually do that on an app and have that app feed me the data associated with the fish tank. So great, it's convenient. What's the problem, Nicole? So I did forget to introduce myself. I am Nicole Cliff, that's part of the Cyber Workforce Academy at the Georgia Cyber Center. So that's done, introduction done. But what's the problem, Nicole, with this fish tank being connected to a network? Well, this fish tank in a very relevant news story was actually used as the point of compromise to access a casino's network, and then they were able to pivot from inside the casino network to retrieve the asset, in this case, of a high roller database. So when you're talking about connecting things, this is really what you have to think about. Is nobody really thought through the aspects of, when I connect this fish tank, is it going to give inadvertent access to someone who is trying to get valuable data that's inside the casino? And this is a reality. This happened. They were actually able to retrieve the high roller database. Now, there are many things that this casino could have done to circumvent this particular problem. So say, for instance, you could still have a connected fish tank, but you could protect it from the rest of your network that has valuable, sensitive assets, so they wouldn't be able to access that fish tank and then move to a different part of your casino network and gain sensitive information. So we call that network segmentation, and that's a little bit further than we want to go in today's basic presentation and seminar. But there are control mechanisms that we put in place. But what happens is the default behavior is just to connect something and forget about it. And that's what we don't want to do, is many connected systems are connected with security as an afterthought. And that presents a huge problem, because we have to think about the implications of what that fish tank is able to touch. So fish tank compromise, not a big deal. But if I can move from the fish tank somewhere else in the network, then that's where the problem actually comes in. So we have really in today's times, we have two different types of personas. We actually have our physical persona, which is the persona that everybody interacts with today. So it's when I show up to work, my friends actually know my name. They know my job position, where I work. They may, for instance, even know my birthday. So that information is part of who I am. They know my physical characteristics, what I look like, so on and so forth. But on the on your online identity, that's a completely different identity. And you want to make sure that you're not sharing sensitive information with your online identity. You want to make sure we have information, what's called PII. You're not sharing your phone number, you're not sharing your address, you're not sharing your birth date on any social media profiles. You want to make sure that you're not divulging too much information with your online identity, because cyber criminals scour these sites looking for the revelation of this information, and then they actually use it to craft a specific attack. So the more information you share, the more vulnerable you are. The more you protect your online identity, which doesn't necessarily include your social media profiles, but it definitely is one aspect of that. But any account that you log into what we refer to as cyberspace or on the internet with online credentials is part of your online profile. So you don't want to reveal too much information with any username that you choose. So every site today, which is a very annoying feature for me, requires you create a username and password. So possibly if you shop at the mall, say for instance in a particular store, if they want to reward you as a customer with points or coupons or whatever that reward mechanism may be, they may ask you to create a profile. And as we know, that profile exists in an online environment, and it requires you to log into that system, and that's online credentials. And you may think that nobody wants your online credentials. That isn't valuable to cyber criminals. But I want to inform you today that your online credentials are actually valuable. Say for instance you have a frequent flyer account with a particular airline. That requires you to log in with a username and password. If your online credentials are compromised, then someone could actually steal your frequent flyer miles and use those to book a free trip or gain upgrades for different flights that they book. So that actually happened where United and American Airlines were compromised, and it was not the actual airline site that was compromised. So this isn't a compromise of the corporate company, but the cyber criminals were able to steal the credentials of the users, and they logged into those accounts and then redeemed the frequent flyer miles. And of course, the airline was gracious enough to actually restore those frequent flyer accounts as part of fraudulent activity on behalf of the user's account. But you have to think about everything you do online and frame it in the terms of how valuable is this to a cyber criminal. Your online credentials are valuable. That's why you don't want to do things like repeating passwords across sites. So for every loyalty program that you participate in, you're like, oh my gosh, I'm not going to have a different password for every one of these sites. So how can I control this? I'm just going to create the same password and I'll use it. But understand that if that password is compromised on one site, that attackers then have the possibility of using that on multiple sites that they find associated with your online identity and then compromise all of those accounts. So that's why a unique complex password is something that we always preach. And any site in terms of online credentials should always be extra secured, if you will, by including multi-factor authentication. And when we talk about multi-factor authentication, we're saying log in with a username, log in with a password. But once you do so, that site is going to generate a unique token and send that, say for instance, send an SMS message to your cell phone. And then the two of those, you actually inputting that code into the corporation or organizational website is going to complete the multi-factor authentication. And there's lots of things that you can use as far as multi-factor, and that's just one example. But if multi-factor is available, it is 100% recommended that you use it. Now we're going to move into a different portion of the seminar that some people may find a little scary. Me, not so much, because I believe that information is power. So use this information to make yourself powerful as far as your digital personas and protect yourself using this information instead of allowing it to invoke fear. So one of the first questions that we could ask is, how are the hackers stealing data? Well, I first want to caveat that by saying that they're not necessarily just stealing data. Hackers have many motivations. Stealing data is one aspect of those. So they could actually want to alter the data. Say, for instance, there was a financial transaction that was sent from point A to point B, and an attacker wanted to gain access to that transaction and alter it, which we refer to in this, as a cybersecurity practitioner, we call that compromising the integrity of that data. We're changing it as it moves en route. So they could want to change that data. They could want to corrupt that data as just an ability to create an inability to access that data. They could want to steal the data as some sort of intellectual property theft. They could want to delete the data so it's not accessible at all. So there are different motivations of the hackers and cyber criminals that exist in this realm. They use malware in order to compromise the system to be able to gain access to that system. So hackers, based on the varying levels of complexity of these hackers, and we have everything from script kiddies all the way up to what we call advanced persistent threats. And basically a script kiddie is someone who can just point and click using a particular tool and craft their exploit targeted to a specific system. where an APT is going to go through the necessary, they're going to exercise the due diligence and due care to, they're in it for the long haul. They want to write code specific to the system that they want to target to be able to compromise that system. And if it takes them 3 months, 6 months, a year, 2 years, then they're dedicated to that cause. And in many cases, these cyber criminals that operate on the network, they are very vested in crafting an exploit that specifically targets, that's specific to their target. So don't underestimate the dedication of these cyber criminals in terms of their engineering skills and the fact that this is a well-paid operation. So they actually, in order to steal the data or compromise the data in any specific way, they have to be able to gain access to that system. And in doing so, they may use some sort of luring mechanism in order to be able, say for instance, that's a phishing attack or what we call a social engineering attack, or you accidentally click on a link that's inside an email and that link navigates to a remote attacker's site and the installation of malware occurs on your machine. So you ask, well, you use this term malware, what is it? It's actually a short abbreviation for malicious software. And there are many different types of malware. So say for instance, you've probably heard about a type of malware called ransomware. Ransomware has the ability to take an organization's data hostage. It actually encrypts that data and says you're not going to get access to your data and all your files until you pay a ransom. And then we'll provide you the key to unencrypt your data and make that readable to the organization again. But that's only going to be after you pay this ransom fee. And that ransom is actually, the money is delivered in Bitcoin, which is a digital currency that is currently untraced. So it's a lot different than, you know, transferring one amount of money from one bank to another. The actual premise of digital currency in the terms of Bitcoin is that it is untraceable. So they ask their victims to pay the ransom using Bitcoin. And that is one type of malware. And it is one of the most prevalent that's existent, and organizations are actually facing this problem and combating ransomware. We're talking about hospitals, we're talking about legal firms, we're talking about just regular organizations where their data is being held hostage. Now think about that in terms of a legal firm or in terms of a healthcare institution. If they can't get access to patient data files, if a lawyer can't get access to the case files that he's going to court to try in that particular day, that's definitely problematic. And it is forecasted that ransomware attacks will not decrease in upcoming years. So in 2021, it is forecasted that there will be a ransomware attack every 11 seconds. So I don't know if you've just taken the time lately to count to 11. I mean, I haven't. But thinking about this, that's a lot of ransomware attacks. So when we talk about finding people to work in this field, these are the types of problems that we're facing. Is the cyber criminal organization and the hacktivists and people that are nation state actors that are working in this field are dedicated to their cause and very well financed. So we have to be very forward leaning in our thought processes of how to combat these particular types of problems. So I specifically talked about ransomware as one of the strains, if you will, of malware. There are also things like probably a term you're more familiar with would be a virus. Maybe it's a worm, a Trojan horse, a keylogger, spyware, adware. These are all different forms of malware that can be installed on a computer. When we talk about spyware, it's specifically dealing with the fact that the malware may not do anything nefarious on the computer that the user notices, but it could activate the webcam and actually record everything that a user does, or a keylogger could actually record every key strike that's entered on a keyboard and actually send that over to a remote server. So malware actually stands for malicious software. Some piece of software that has some sort of malicious intent. So I want to tell you up front that anything that uses software that's connected to a network becomes vulnerable. That's why we say when we connect a device to the network, it's increasing that attack surface. Because it being connected, the fact that it has software, the fact that a user, remember that technology, processes, and people, it has a user that's trying to make a cognitive decision about, oh, should I click on this link or should I not, becomes an issue. So let's just say you didn't make a good decision and you clicked on the link. So what do you do now? How do you spot that malware? Well, hopefully you have, if we're talking about personal computers, you have some sort of anti-malware package that you're using in order to protect that system. And the anti-malware also needs to be extended to any device connected, like an iPad or your phone. And if you're looking for specific signs of that malware, what might be an indication that you're infected? Maybe your antivirus engine, your antivirus software package didn't detect the virus. And I will tell you, based on the features of these antivirus, anti-malware packages, they detect the presence of these viruses differently. So it could be that that malware was able to fly under the radar and go undetected because it was using a more sophisticated mechanism to infect that computer. But some of the most general signs that you want to look for are CPU usage. So if you've got spikes of high CPU usage that are out of the ordinary, and that out of the ordinary, I must say, is very important. So you have to have some measure of our baseline of what is normal for your computer's operation in order to determine, hey, I'm looking at the CPU usage and this isn't normal. So you want to go look at those features before you're actually infected, so you have some sort of point of reference. If your computer is constantly crashing or hanging up, it frequently gets stuck on a specific web page, that could be indicative of some sort of infection of malware. Also, if you have a folder that is deleted, some sort of missing data, or that data becomes unreadable. It could be that your hard drive is failing and you're not infected with malware at all. But in most cases today, it has to do with the presence of malware infecting that machine. Ads popping up on a computer are also an indication of some sort of adware or spyware that could be installed on that computer. So you definitely want to run scans. And if those scans come back clean, you may want to use a different product or just do further investigation before you walk away with, okay, I think I'm good. Because typically those signs point to some sort of infection. Next, we go into, now that we've talked about how our machines are vulnerable and the different types of malicious software that's present on the network, we have to talk about, well, who are these hackers, and can anybody become a hacker, or is it just too expensive? Is this just for an elite group that exists and operates on what we call the dark net? And hopefully this information that's included on this slide will bring you to the realization that it's very easy, and you could actually Google search hire a hacker and get, I think at the last time I checked the data, it was over 1 million responses that you would get in a Google search to hire a hacker. So understand, you don't have to be a hacker. You can hire a hacker. Just like if your plumbing breaks inside your bathroom and your bathroom tub is leaking or shower is leaking, you can YouTube to figure out how to maybe fix the plumbing, or you can hire a plumber. You don't have to possess those necessary skill sets. Or if you're looking to attack a specific target in the cyber world, you can actually hire a hacker. And we don't put these numbers up and give you this information to elicit you becoming a hacker. So disclaimer here, that's not what we're trying, that's not the message that we want to send here. The message is you need to look at how, and you need to be educated on how easy it is to gain access to a hacker, and that it does not cost a lot of money. So if we talk about hiring or who can afford to hack in terms of a targeted attack, a targeted attack is something like what happened to the Sony Corporation or what happened to the Target Corporation. Basically, a hacker is going to dedicate an infinite amount of resources to accomplishing their goal in that particular hack. And it is targeted to a very specific organization, like in the Sony case or like in the Target hack. And look at the price tag associated with a targeted attack. So that's $4,500. And if you think about the amount of money that would be earned as the revenue from hacking this particular organization like Sony or Target in this case, that's not a lot of money. The next item is stealing from an ATM. Now, when we talk about stealing from an ATM, it could be an attacker has infected the ATM machine with a device that's actually offloading your card number and PIN so that it can clone that card and sell it on the dark net. Or it could be that specific software that is running on the ATM, because when you walk up to an ATM, there's this graphical user interface where you are interacting with software to say, I want to access this account, and here's my PIN to authenticate, and I want this much money out of the bank. Well, that is an obvious indication that that particular automatic teller machine is running software. What did we say about software? It's vulnerable. So an attacker could gain access to that software that's facilitating the operation of that ATM and cause it to spit out money just randomly, or in specific amounts, or in specific bills. So I remember years ago there was the circulation of the Plotus ATM malware, and this was a specific strain of malware that would infect ATMs and cause them to not operate as expected. So basically, I want to be able to predict the operation of an ATM. I don't want it to randomly spit out money, because that's a problem for the bank. So understand that whether it be cloning users' information that use that ATM, or whether it be infecting the actual ATM itself, those are avenues to exploit that particular connected system. And look at the price tag associated with that, $1,500. So say, for instance, you wanted to infect a legal organization with ransomware. So you could have a hacker craft a Trojan horse that is a specific strain of software that would infect 1,000 nodes, because based on how you want it to circulate or propagate through the organization, how many nodes you want it to affect is going to be associated with your price tag. So you can do this. You can hire this service for $750. Infecting with Trojan for mining. Now this is something that we haven't talked about yet. So a lot of people actually think about hacking in terms of they're trying to steal data, they're trying to corrupt data, they're trying to change data. And that's the scope that we frame hacking. But in today's term, there are actually, in today's technological advancements, there's something called crypto mining, where I want to mine for cryptocurrency, which is a form of this digital currency that exists on the internet. Mining requires CPU resources. So I could create and we'll talk about this term in just a minute, so if you're unfamiliar with it, just be patient and I'll get to it. But I could use a botnet to infect computers, and those computers, instead of doing anything, like I'm actually not going to steal data from that computer, but I'm going to use the CPU resources. What I am stealing is the CPU resources in order to use that to craft an attack against my specific target, in this case, which is crypto mining. So infecting a system with some sort of Trojan malicious software for the purpose of mining, doing crypto mining, that's just $300. If you're looking at stealing payment data, do you see how what we consider valuable as far as stealing payment data, that's something that's very near and dear to our hearts as users, but someone can hire someone to hack this information for $270. And when you look at this, when you dive deeper, I just included a few of these on the slide, but if you want to hack someone's Facebook account or social media profiles, you can do that for like $75. So what the point I'm trying to emphasize to you is it doesn't take a lot of money depending on what you're trying to do. And in terms of that, you need to make sure that you're offering those systems adequate protection, because you think I'm not a target or that would cost too much money. No, that's not the case. Everyone connected to a network is a target. Okay, everyone connected to a network is a target. And you need to make sure you're exercising the appropriate precautions to protect any system. Your Wi-Fi at home, any computer connected to that Wi-Fi or any device connected to that Wi-Fi is being properly secured. So say, for instance, you want to hack a website or deface a website. Hacking a website could be to look for specific corporate information. Defacing a website means I want to put something other than how that website was created. I want to put something embarrassing that any customer who visits that site who sees this embarrassing something actually walks away, and that particular company's reputation and brand has been damaged because their website has been defaced. So this happens a lot with religious or any type of ideological organization. Hacking into someone's email is also very easy, and what we call a DDoS attack. Now, the prices of a DDoS attack vary in terms of research today, and let's just frame what a DDoS attack is. DDoS is a distributed denial of service attack. And that distributed denial of service attack, so there is denial of service attack, that means I'm going to throw as much illegitimate data toward your target site as possible so that the service that you are offering to your customers becomes unavailable. Distributed means that I'm going to source that attack from multiple geographical locations. And in sourcing that from different multiple geographical locations, basically I'm increasing the volume of the attack, and I could throw up to the amount of money I spent to target a specific attack. And if you actually research this, it says if the site is unprotected, it'll cost you this much money. Of course, if they've got to jump through a lot of hoops to actually get to the website because it's a protected site, then it's going to cost you more money. But it can actually throw up to 1 terabyte or multiple terabytes of data to that particular server in order to render that server's services unavailable to the user, which creates a problem because every minute or second that that service is not available to a user, it could potentially cost the organization money or definitely alter the perception of that particular company's brand or reputation. When we talk about the term botnet, let's give this some context up front. So a botnet, let's take the words apart. So a single computer that is infected with malware that is connected out to the internet to an attacker's machine that is then using software to control that, that infected machine. If it is an attacker's machine is controlling an affected machine, it's referred to as a bot. So the more computers that I infect with this malicious software, I create what's called a botnet. And a botnet could be in upwards of 100,000 computers that are infected. And all of these computers that are connected across the globe are calling back to some sort of command and control channel. And this command and control channel is basically manipulating this computer in order for it to accomplish the purpose of a specific attack. What are the purposes? What would those purposes be? As we just spoke about, a distributed denial of service attack. You want to automate attack preparation for a specific attack surface or a target machine. So maybe you're laying the groundwork before you actually go in and steal confidential data. Because cyber attacks are actually classified. There are cyber criminal attacks, and there are that result in corporations and organizations being breached. And then there are different types of attacks that are conducted by nation-state attackers that may result in cyber espionage. Say, for instance, if the Chinese are looking to gain the blueprints for our next fighter jet, and they compromise Lockheed Martin, say, for instance, Lockheed Martin, so they could have compromised those machines in advance, but haven't done anything in terms of actually stealing the data. So the actual attack on the target will come as the very last step, but they want to gain access to those systems and maybe lay low for a while before they actually accomplish their actions on objectives, as we refer to that in the cyber kill chain. It could be that they want to just steal resources from your computer, as we also spoke about with crypto mining. So this is one of the many threats that you face with your computer being connected, is that some attacker could infect your system with malware, and then your system could be used in compilation with other systems to create this botnet. And then, as you can see, what those botnets are used for. So what about your data? There are many different types of data, and we'll look at these in terms of what you're used to, what you're used to accessing every day. So you have your personal information, and then you have the information that requires you to authenticate to a server in order to gain access to that information. Say for instance, if you are just the general information that's indexed on the internet is accessible through what we call the surface web. And this is always explained using the iceberg analogy, because the iceberg, only part of it sticks up out of the surface of the water for someone to view. And that top part of the iceberg is what we call the surface web. But the fact of the matter is that that iceberg exists is very lengthy underwater, and there's other parts of the iceberg that isn't viewable. So just because you only see what's on the surface web doesn't mean that's representative of all the information that's accessible. So say for instance, if you wanted to access research that's available through different journals or publications in academia, then you're required to log on to that university's website, present some authenticated credentials, and then you gain access to lots of academic research, and that rests on the deep web. Much of that is not present or indexed on the original web. Medical records. Medical records are actually stored on a server, and you say, well, that server is on the internet because that information is digital. Yes, but you're not going to find it just on searching on the regular web using a normal web browser like Google, or you actually have to interface that data with logging into a medical portal that is then going to transport you to where that data is stored on what we refer to as the deep web. Okay, so we have the surface web, we have the deep web, where other information is represented. Say for instance, your banking information. You don't want that available on the surface web, and if your bank told you that it was there, you'd be troubled about that. You'd think, oh, I'm not comfortable with that. Let me put my money back under the mattress. I'm going to take it out of the bank. But actually the fact that you are authenticating to that bank says that we're going to access that server that's present on the deep web in order to present that information to you as the user. So the authentication part of that allows you to access the information that's available there. That is completely different than what's present on the dark web. The dark web is just, let's divide it into categories. So there's great information that can be used for valuable research in like communist countries that, you know, don't know much about democracy and democratic nations and things of that nature that fall into that same category. But there's also very dark, just bad stuff on the dark web. And the dark web, this information is only accessed through a special type of browser that we'll talk about in the next slide. And I do want to point out that there's access to illegal information. You may have heard about Silk Road, and there's like 3 other iterations of something like the Silk Road that have all tried to basically create a business on the dark web to sell illegal stuff. When I'm talking about stuff, we're talking about weapons, drugs, all the way to organs. So that's what makes it very, very dark. So in order to access the dark web, you can't just log on to a Google or Mozilla Firefox browser in order to access the dark web. You gotta have a special type of software. And while there are different aspects of onion-based routing, Tor is one application that allows us to access the dark web. And basically, it's filtering your communication through what we call layered proxies, which is where we get the term onion-based routing. Because if you think of an onion, what's at the center of that onion is the bulb. And there are different layers of the onion that protect the bulb. Well, the different layers that you move through in communication in order to move from the source to the destination is protecting someone's identity. So Tor, in and of itself, anonymizes the web traffic associated with anything you do on the internet. So say, for instance, you just want to research a specific topic and you do not want the research of that topic associated with your online identity that we talked about earlier. You don't want the government to know how long you spent on a specific website and all the different websites that you visited. So that's the good part of Tor, is that you can use it for good purposes if you just want to keep a low profile on the internet. Because please understand, everything you do on the internet is being tracked in some way, shape, form, or fashion in terms of the websites you visit. That's how we get target marketing. And everybody thinks this whole mysterious thing that I was just talking about, animal print leggings. And then all of a sudden, all of my social media feeds started showing me all this animal print. Like, I wonder if they're listening to me. Well, wonder no more. Like, we can clear that up today. Yes, they are. That's how target marketing works. And so this information on the dark web is accessible using this Tor onion-based router, which is actually encrypting your traffic for every node that it travels through. And because it's doing that, it is a lot slower than any traditional web browsing. In today's social media prevalence, when you look at things like what just happened with our election and President Trump being a huge tweeter and using Twitter to expose his message or talk to the public. In today's time, please do not underestimate that social media is influential and people can buy influence on the web. So you can actually, just like we talked about renting a botnet or renting malware, and these are professionalized services where you can, like, just like if you buy a specific software and it doesn't work right, you can call the support number and get the help that you need. Malware is also supported. It's the criminal organization is professionalized to the point that they offer service, and then after you pay for their service, they come back and they say, "How was it? Did you like it? Like, what can we do better?" Like, they are into pleasing the customer. So just like you can buy the malware that's present on the internet, you can also buy influence. Why? Why do people want to buy influence? Because influence is powerful. And social media in and of itself, less and less people are actually navigating to the main news media outlets, and they're actually using social media as their source of news. So if I can trend up in Twitter by buying likes or buying influence, then that is something as a company, corporation, organization, I would want to do. So that's actually a thing, and you can see the costs associated with those. And this is available on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube. So the next time you look at someone's specific profile and you think, oh my gosh, they have all these likes or they have all this, like, don't look at it from the context of it may not be real. Like, they may just be so desperate that they actually purchase those likes. So now we get to talk into, hopefully something I've said in the previous session intrigued you to the point that you're like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. Because that's me every day. When I'm reading the news, when I'm, just coming to work, there are so many things in this particular career field that constantly fascinate me and intrigue me to the degree that, like, I absolutely love my job and love what I do. And this field is so diverse that there's so many different aspects that you could start in and then move into different areas based on how your interest levels may change. So some of the things that we'll talk about deal with specific categories of communities. So when we talk about cyber-focused careers, the different colors actually deal with the different communities. And so a lot of people actually want to land themselves straight into the blue community of cybersecurity. But it may require you, especially if you're starting off in this field, it may require you to spend some time in IT, to spend some time in the programming community in order to master a specific skill set in one of those areas in order to be able to transition to cybersecurity. Because cybersecurity, at the end of the day, is about the security of these things that we look at in these different communities. The security of the systems that are part of our information network. The security of the operating system that is on that information system. And then on top of that operating system, there's lots of different applications. And every application presents a vector or an avenue that someone could explore to target that particular system and infect it. So I say that to say, don't be afraid to spend some time in one of these communities in order to build a strong foundational skill set before you're actually able to transition into the cybersecurity community. Now, there's a lot of people who say, well, why cyber? And cyber is definitely a huge buzzword in this particular area in Augusta because, everybody wants to jump into the field of cyber. And that is really because of the salary range associated with this particular skill set. Now, I do want to point out to you that for the information technology field, the median salary, according to national statistics, actually falls into the 70K range. If you're talking about entry level, you may come in as 50 to 60K, depending on your unique skill set. As the more experience you have and the more, say for instance, specialized certifications you get in that field makes you more valuable in terms of what you offer that organization. So then of course your pay increases 80 to 105K in the more intermediate and advanced level. Programming, you can start in a median salary at 97K. And the top and low ranges there are based on 105 to 65K, depending on your skills experience. And then you look at cybersecurity, and cybersecurity starts in the median salary at 95. So a lot of people say, like, I want the money that's available in cyber. But again, you're going to come in if you don't have a lot of breadth and depth that you can offer an organization in terms of your skill set. You may start in the field lower than 75K. It just depends on the demand and the job and how you interview, because soft skills are very important in trying to pursue a career in cybersecurity. And the top end of that is 105K and greater, depending on what you're doing in cybersecurity. But again, look at this in terms of careers are journeys and not a destination. So just because I started a particular job doesn't mean that that job is my destination. I may use this particular job as leverage in order to move from place to place in pursuit of my journey to a particular goal or endpoint. So now we're going to look at some of the different roles. I'm not going to spend a lot of time because looking at the time we're actually over time, but I do want to talk to you about what some of these community jobs offer and how to measure your own personality and skill set to see if you would be a good fit for this particular type of job. So someone who's working in technical support, nobody wants to interface to someone in technical support who's just mundane and very matter of fact and not forthcoming with information and just at the end of the day friendly. And you also have to be able to look past what the customer may not be telling you. You know, to have that intuitiveness about you that's like, okay, they didn't tell me this, but this is an assumption because I know that this particular problem happens to a lot of people. So technical support is really going to be someone who has those personality traits. They have to be good at solving problems, and it may not be the surface level problem that's presented by the user. It may go, you know, several levels deeper, but you have to be persistent in your ability to solve the problem to its solution. So your ability to work in this field and interface with customers is only going to make yourself more marketable to advance to another higher level career field. The different job titles that are supported here can be anywhere from a help desk operator, a support engineer, a network support technician, or even a network support engineer. We get a lot of questions about, well, what certifications should I pursue? It's really dependent upon what you want to do. You could target a specific certification, or you could say industry is demanding this specific certification, so I'm going to get that to make myself more marketable to more organizations or corporations. But maybe you want to target a specific organization or a specific skill set. That may limit the opportunities that you have, but it would definitely land you in a role that you're doing something that you know you want to do. So the different certifications that would work or be required in any job description, or just some of the job descriptions, could be A+, Network Plus, which is a CompTIA certification, your Cisco Certified Technician, which is an entry-level routing technician, switching and routing technician. So it's not the full breadth of a CCNA enterprise technician. There'll be some skills that are lacking there and are very basic. And then of course Linux essentials. In any security technical support, you're going to use Linux tools. So Linux is something great to have in your back pocket, as well as different Microsoft certifications. System administration actually deals with, do you have the ability to look at not just a particular router or switch, but how do all of these systems interoperate and exchange data? Because as the data moves throughout the complexity of the network, it's going to change formats. It's going to change in the way it's represented. It's actually going to change in the way it's accessed. So you have to be able to look at, from a system administration perspective, the big picture and care about the very intricate details. And when we talk about a system, it is framed in the context of any computer, device, network, people, business function that's unique to that environment. So whether that's banking or manufacturing or a financial organization or an educational institution. Some of the job titles include systems engineer, systems integrator, and a voice engineer. And then some of the certifications could include CompTIA Linux, the actual Linux Professional Institute certification, or a various degree of Microsoft certifications as well. A network administrator, a network engineer. I actually got my start in cybersecurity in this field, so definitely one of my loves and passions. I could talk to you about networking for hours on end and never get bored. So if you ever want to talk BGP or multi-protocol BGP, I'm your girl. Like, just reach out to me, and it's something that I actually love and am greatly passionate about. Network basically represents, if you think about the network, it's really, at the end of the day, I want to make the network work, which is represented with these green lights. So if you go in your data center or you go in your network infrastructure closet and you got all green lights, or red indicates there's a problem that you have to troubleshoot, that you have to be able to frame that problem in the context of how it relates to other parts of the network, because it may not be specific to the device that it's showing up on. So in many times it could be a misconfiguration error. It could be a hardware failure. You know, those happen. It could be the result of an attack, where there's been an attack and some sort of malicious software installed on that. And then you're probably going to escalate that to your security team and just report it accordingly. Some of the training options that are supportive of the role network administrator include your Network Plus, which is very low level. And as you move into Cisco Certified Network Associate in the enterprise path, or the Cisco Certified Network Professional. And as many of you may know, networking is actually moving to a more software-defined base. So Cisco Networking Academy actually has programs that can teach you how to learn networking as it moves through different aspects of software that's actually carrying your data today. Software development is another field, and I take the opportunity just to smile at you, those who are listening, because this is one of my least favorite topics to talk about. I do have some programming skills in my portfolio, but it's just because I've had to evolve with the times, not because I necessarily wanted to be a programmer. So that's something you have to be willing to do as well, is you have to evolve with what, as technology evolves, you as a professional in this field have to evolve to make sure that your skills remain relevant. And if you feel like someone's called you an overanalyzer, and you're very passionate about, well, this is a way we could solve this problem. Like you're able to frame a problem and look at it in a different viewpoint, in a different context, then this is a career field that you would probably work well in. Because software is basically creating these different snippets of code which represent pieces of a puzzle that a software developer is putting together in order to frame that entire picture and make something work. So you could be an application developer, a software engineer, and whether that application developer could be specific to an information system like desktop or an app developer. A software engineer is also a role, as well as someone who is skilled in Linux as a Linux administrator. So some of the training options here include PCAP, which is the programming pathway for someone who is pursuing a Python certification. So Python has certifications in entry level as well as an associate level. And then your Cisco Certified DevNet Associate is Cisco recognizing that industry is evolving and we are no longer this this group of devices, but we have now combined software, programming, devices, all in this intermix of operation. So a network engineer just doesn't have to know infrastructure, but now he's required to know a little bit about the developer side in terms of how to make an API pull data from a Cisco router. How do I make that API, how do I format that API call to a specific device? And is it specific to a specific language like XML or JSON or Python, for instance? And then we have the security administrator. So this is where you're actually trying to go in and monitor alerts to see if something nefarious has happened. You have to have the ability to differentiate a false positive from a false negative. So say for instance, a false positive would be you got an alert, but as you investigate it, you find out that it's not a true indicator of compromise. Whereas a false negative, you did not get an alert, but you're seeing some things that look suspicious and you go back and look at those and you find out, wow, this didn't get reported, but it definitely was an indicator of compromise. So basically your day-to-day is thinking like an attacker. How would an attacker go after this particular system? And if they did attack that system, what would they be after? What are they looking for? So in order for you to maintain relevance in this field, you definitely have to stay up to date on security news. And how I knew that I wanted to start in this field was because I actually loved and was very intrigued and fascinated by reading security news. The more I read, the more I wanted to read. I would bounce from website to website to website, trying to get more information. And I had already been trained formally in networking, so I was like, I'm going to study information systems security because this is something that I'm very, very interested in. So cybersecurity is hard. You hear that said often in this field because the problems are complex, which is why our former Governor Dill actually saw the need to put a Georgia Cyber Center in place so that academia, government, and private industry could work together to solve these complex cybersecurity problems. So the security administrator actually can look at infrastructure, data, applications, and they're actually going to have the CompTIA Security Plus, and they could have a more specific certification pathway that actually prepares them for a cybersecurity analyst role. Operations is the same way as someone that's actually going to look into the actual security operations center. They're going to be an incident responder and directly respond to any cybersecurity threats. And now it is time for us, that's actually my last slide in the security operations. And the only other thing I was going to do is point you to a resource in this cyberseek.org that shows you, if you navigate to this website, and that's www.cyberseek.org. If you just Google for Cyberseek, you should be able to find this. The career pathway, this is an interactive map that you can actually click on, say for instance, an entry-level position, and it shows you the relational jobs at mid-level. And then if you actually click on one at the bottom, the information that's available in terms of the salary, the job titles, the requested education, what skills are requested as part of pursuing this role, And then the NIST or NICE cybersecurity workforce categories, this actually falls into operate, maintain, and protect and defend. It shows the job openings. So how do you know you're trying to go into a field that's saturated and there's not a lot of availability for this particular position? Well, this site is great because it gives you that information. There's also the interactive map. If you go back here, so if I want to look specific to Georgia, I can click on the state of Georgia and see the metrics for cybersecurity job openings in the state of Georgia, the workforce, so the strength of the workforce, if that's data I'm trying to pull, and then the different job titles that I may want to pursue skills that align to these different job titles. Please bear in mind that in terms of the cybersecurity pathways, there are these different communities, and then there's like legal auditors in cyber. There's financial auditors in the cyber world. So maybe your skills are math, and you actually want to apply those in a cyber arena as a financial auditor or a digital forensic investigator. Say, for instance, you like crimes and investigation of crimes. Well, there are cyber crimes that have to be investigated and the digital evidence has to be explored. So that's another avenue that you could pursue in going in. It's not just this job where you're sitting behind a computer hacking or analyzing data sets. There are various fields that you should explore before deciding or landing in one specific area. So that concludes my presentation for today on the seminar Hacking into Cybersecurity. We are so happy that you have joined us. Hopefully you found the session informational and we can look to do more of these in the future. But now I'm actually going to take the time to field any questions that you may have on different career fields or any point that I brought up today in the presentation. So with that, I'm actually going to go on mute, and then our team member will actually field those questions. Thank you so much. So one of the questions that we get asked a lot in this particular career field is, you know, a lot of people who pursue these careers think that they do not have to have a lot of interpersonal skills or soft skills in order to work in this field. So I'd like to say that that's not always true, okay? So in order to pursue a job and be successful in any role, you need to make sure that you're taking the time to develop your technical skills as well as your soft skills. And you may not say, for instance, that interpersonal skills are a strength of yours, and that's really okay. You don't have to be strong in interpersonal skills, but you're definitely going to have to interact with people and be able to articulate very technical subjects to people who do not normally understand and synthesize technical information. So keep in mind when you are pursuing a career, you think, well, I really, I'm not going to need to talk to people. My appearance doesn't really matter. No, that's not the case, because many times you're actually going to have to brief leadership on why you need a specific security appliance in order to secure your network, why you need to spend X amount of dollars. And they don't want to hear because of a specific strain of malware like Mariah botnet that infected X amount of IoT devices. They don't care about the technical speak. They want to know at the end of the day how this matters to the bottom line of the organization. And so your soft skills need to be developed so that you can articulate in a way that the people understand why you need X, Y, or Z, and you can get that as you require. So if you're looking for certifications that are quick and easy to obtain, it's really going to be dependent on your skill set. So if you've never touched a computer, well, an A+ is a rather low-level certification, but you may have a hard time obtaining it if you've never used a USB drive, for instance, because that's more about the hardware side of things. Network Plus is also a very baseline certification that doesn't require a very vast amount of skills and information in the networking field. It really just starts to whet your appetite again about the different technologies and protocols and how those operate and work together in order to share information. So here at the Georgia Cyber Center, we actually have someone who performs the role of connecting Augusta University, Augusta Technical College, and other students that are in school who are looking to pursue careers in cybersecurity via apprenticeship programs and internship programs. So if you visit the georgiacybercenter.org website and go to services and training, there's actually a cybertraining.augusta.edu that you could reach out to that email, and they would link you to the different programs that are available in apprenticeships or internships. Our partner website also has a list of the opportunities that are available. And when I talk about partners, I'm talking about our private industry partners that are part of the Georgia Cyber Center campus. So those exist as far as BAE Systems, and GBI, Georgia Bureau of Investigation, and cybercrime jobs and internships. So don't just visit our website, but visit the partner section and look at the different partner opportunities, because if they offer those programs, those would also be listed there. And I would also say that right now, don't be discouraged by the season of life we are in terms of what we're able to do, because our campus is currently closed to external visitors, but we will reopen again. And so right now we can't have external visitors like apprenticeships and internships on campus. But when we're able to reopen, all of those programs will resume, and you will be able to full-fledged pursue those opportunities. So the question was, do you have to have a degree before you pursue a job in cybersecurity? And that's a great question. And it's another question that we actually are asked a lot. It really depends on the employer. So you have to visit employer websites and find out what their qualifications are for the job. Because sometimes an employer will actually translate your experience into or matriculate your experience into education based on a particular job skill that you held in a previous role. So I would not dismiss any cybersecurity job that you felt you weren't qualified for because you lacked one of the requirements. So there are some systems that you apply for the job, if you don't meet the minimum qualifications, the computer kicks you out right away. But there are many who, if you apply for the job and you're able to make it through the system, they screen your resume and look at the value that you would bring to the organization with your experience. So not necessarily. You really just need to visit this specific application, and normally if it's on the application, they'll say required or preferred. Now, if you're looking to the degree of, I'm trying to figure out, should I go pursue a formal education pathway? I would say at the end of the day, that is only going to make you more marketable. But while you're pursuing your formal education, you could also be pursuing jobs that potentially did not require a formal education and would leverage your professional certification paths. So I think that's all of the questions that we have in our live chat. Again, I would like to thank you for taking the time to join this seminar today, and we look to have more of these in the future. If you will, just reach out to our cybertraining.augusta.edu and let us know how you enjoyed the session, and I wish you a great rest of the day.